Hey everyone, it's them nerds. We're coming from our layers to bring you a new Throwback Thursday where we're going to be talking about 2000's X-Men, the movie. And you got my buddy Tony here. You got me, Jerry, and we're going to just, fulfill every part of the X-Men fan lore that happened in this movie. So it's the first time really that any of us got to see live action Professor X, Jean Grey, Storm, Rogue, Wolverine, Cyclops. It was a plethora of X-Men. What did you think of it, Tony?
Well, I'll tell you what, when this thing came out, I think we were talking about this last night. I think we went and saw it together.
Yeah.
In the theater in 2000. And as like a huge X-Men fan, both of us are, but you especially, like we were super stoked to go see this. And it was awesome. At the time, watching it was just like, I was transfixed. There are certain things about it that, I think they knocked out of the park back then. I thought they did. And watching it today, I still think they did. Not the least of which was the epic casting of Patrick Stewart as Professor X and Sir Ian McKellen as Eric Lehnsherr, aka Magneto. Two of the greatest actors ever to live, perfectly playing these two iconic roles. I thought they knocked it out of the park. Then I thought it was great, and even now watching it, I still think like, wow.
Yeah, I agree with you totally. I think that really in the end, using them as the really the focal point of the movies was the smart idea. They really carried the movie because a lot of the casting, I think now, when we watched it originally, we didn't know any better, right? So, but when you watch it now, you think just, oh, that's some shaky casting. And I was watching it last night, and I was thinking to myself how I think that this is the reason why X-Men is a kind of franchise that deserves a Disney Plus treatment before it ever hits the big screen. And that's because there's a lot of backstory that has to be told that can't be fit into a first movie. There's no reason really for these people, like, if anybody knows anything about the X-Men, Magneto is always their ultimate foe. But you would get the impression when you're watching that movie that this is the first time they've ever fought.
Right. Yeah.
Which doesn't make a lot of sense.
No, it especially doesn't make sense given the fact that they cast Scott, Jean, and Storm as older.
Yeah.
And so you must assume that they've been around with the X-Men for a while, and they're acting like this is the first time they've seen Magneto. It just doesn't really track.
Well, it also comes across almost like it's their first battle they've ever had.
Yeah, which is odd.
Yeah,
Especially since they have uniforms and everything.
Yeah, you've been skeet shooting for 30 years. What's going on? But I get where they're coming from. It's a movie that was supposed to branch off, which it did, and it's the reason why why we love Marvel films now is because of this movie and Spider-Man, the original Spider-Man. But where Spider-Man got it right, because they really stuck within the comic book realm, like a lot of the stories that were in Spider-Man, they may have varied from what the actual wordage was on the paper, but the ideas were still there, the characters were still there. Whereas the X-Men, it almost felt like they were trying to just throw the baby out with the bathwater. So because that story that happens in that movie, it really does not take place in any comic book, and there's no background to be like, wow, this is amazing, you did so well. The only thing that really is from the comic that looked good was the first opening scene, which was the whole Holocaust scene, which was filmed amazingly well.
Yes. Yeah, that I had forgotten about that scene, and then when I was rewatching this, it came on, and I was just like, wow, that's really good. And it really, the only thing that I will kind of say, and I know they developed this a little bit later in the sequels, but that scene should have made Magneto a more sympathetic character, because that's what happened, in the comic books. The more we learned about his backstory, the more we sort of understood why he was approaching things the way he was, and he felt more sympathetic. But in the movie, it's like they showed us that, and then we were supposed to just be like, oh, wow, yeah, he was really upset by the Holocaust.
Yeah.
And then like, oh, Eric, you stop doing naughty things.
Yeah.
But like, the Magneto and Professor X backstory, I feel like for this like initial introduction to the X-Men on film, it was fine. There were some other things though, like, and we also got sort of the origins of like Jean and Scott are together. Scott and Wolverine don't get along because of that, right? And we started to see the little inkling of, Jean's into Wolverine and vice versa. But the one that killed me was that Wolverine didn't seem to know anything about Sabretooth, and that's like just insulting.
Well, yeah. Well, they don't really explain in this movie. They maybe kind of make knowledge, like a little bit of the idea of it, but that Wolverine's mind is supposed to be, completely wiped from the Weapon X program. And so that's the reason why he doesn't recognize these people. They don't do a very good job of explaining that. But I think that that's the problem with the movie. There was no focus on the movie itself. So you have Jean and Scott and this Wolverine, triangle going on, but you never actually see a reason why Wolverine has any kind of feelings for Jean in the first place. She literally just stabs you with a needle and then you try to kill her. Like that's really the only interaction that there is. So it doesn't make a lot of sense why by the end of it he's like, oh, I think I'm in love with somebody. And she's like, oh, this will never work out. Well, it probably also doesn't work out because there's no reason for it to work out. Like I've had longer
each other for 2 days.
Yeah, I've had longer interactions with somebody at Target.
It's a long time at Target.
Yeah. Good old days.
Right. Yeah. I feel like one thing they did get sort of right here is that they didn't take on a ton of characters. We got, a lot of Wolverine, right? And we got a lot of Rogue, or at least, a fair amount of Rogue, given the fact that she was kind of a background player for, she wasn't like on the team, like doing, X-Men stuff. She was tied up to a machine and turning her hair white. But I feel like, in the next movie, they introduce Nightcrawler, right? And then in the movie, and in the second movie, is that when Beast comes in, or is he the third one?
Third.
One.
Well, in the second movie, they make mention of him just on the TV.
Okay.
But
so, like, I feel like by the end of X3, which we won't talk about X3 too much, but they had introduced a lot more of the like core team members, and we got this sense that the X-Men was like a bigger thing. And in this one, we really focused on kind of the core, the core group that they were going to use to build out here. So I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah, and I just think that like the Halle Berry casting was not a good casting. It was shaky for a lot of it.
Do you think it would have seemed like as bad of a casting if they wouldn't have had her try to talk like a voodoo priestess?
Yeah, I think I think that did hurt it, but
Call me now.
Yeah. I then watched X-Men 2 and X-Men 3 and her cameos in the other X-Men movies where she didn't have a African accent, and I didn't think she was that great either. So I think it was just poor. I think that Halle Berry was on a trajectory that she was a pretty popular actress, and people just thought put her in the spot rather than is she actually fitting the character. It's going like when you hit the ball out of the park with Patrick Stewart and with Ian McKellen, you can't then say, and even with
Hugh Jackman.
Hugh Jackman.
Yeah.
You can't be like, well, now how much do we have left? And they're like $6.50. And like, okay, let's see what we can get.
True.
You know what I mean? Like you have to just like go for it. And I think that it shows when you watch the later movies. Like you talked about how the Holocaust should have been a lot more of a impact on that character. And I think that that's what X-Men First Class got right, is that they focused a lot more on the abuse that he suffered inside the camp that caused him to be so angry towards everybody else.
Yeah, they had a lot of opportunities to sort of rewrite things during all these X-Men films because they just kept starting over. And I don't know that I'm a fan of that, but we'll have to talk about the next generation of X-Men movies in a different show. But as far as this film as a standalone film, not considering its connection to the others and not considering, what they did with the franchise after, and not considering what they could possibly be doing with the franchise, from here on out now that Disney has control, just looking at it as a standalone movie, I always think of this movie along with movies like Ghost Rider and Blade, and the original Fantastic Four movie and the original Spider-Man movie. And I think of them as like these islands unto themselves, and they weren't trying to connect a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
And I get the same impression from this movie that I got from some of those others, where it's like, hey, cool, they made an X-Men movie.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the end of it. Like with the MCU films, you go in and you're like, okay, let's look for Easter eggs. How does this connect to everything else? Where are they going with this? That they have this planned up like 17 films in advance, So, but as this movie, as a standalone, I liked it. And I think it holds up.
Yeah. I just think that, like they utilize characters that are actually pretty big in the comic books. Like Senator Kelly is a pretty big focal point in the X-Men comics. He does a lot to screw over mutants.
Yeah.
And the treatment that he got in this just didn't make any sense.
Turn him into a booger.
Yeah. Who would you, now that we're kind of branching into this whole new world of the MCU, and we're getting there's possibility that we might be getting, like Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield into these, into the new Spider-Man, into multitude of madness. What characters from this franchise would you like to see, even if it's just a cameo?
Patrick Stewart, 100%. That's the main one that I would want to see. Anna Paquin as Rogue would also be a good one. Having Ian McKellen come back and do a cameo would be pretty cool. I don't, for some reason, it doesn't appeal to me as much as Patrick Stewart, even though he's awesome. I don't know why I wouldn't want him there, but it just doesn't. When I think of people that I would definitely like to see back, the only one that I'm like, yes, I need to see this person back as Professor X, even if it's just for a moment. And I think maybe it's just as kind of an homage to the perfection with which he played this role. It's Patrick Stewart as Professor X. What about you?
I agree. I also think that's something that could be cool. In the comics, the reason why that Rogue is so powerful, she takes away Captain Marvel's powers. If we're going to go in a route where, right now they're building up Captain Marvel, that's if it happens, it will be several movies down the line. What if there was something that happened where the Rogue from that franchise is the one who took Captain Marvel's powers, and then she then in turn goes to this timeline and has the Rogue from here take the powers from her. So that it's a totally different, I think that that's the kind of things that you have the availability to be able to do when you start, because they're other than I really feel like Halle Berry, and I honestly, I feel like Famke Jackson was not a great casting either.
No.
And or James Masterson. But so basically, I dislike 3 people in the movie. No, I take that back. I like Rebecca Romijn as Mystique.
Yeah, that's true. I honestly, I feel like James Marsden is just fine as Cyclops, because Cyclops to me is such a vanilla character that it's like, okay, pick random white guy with brown hair, put red goggles on him, and he's Cyclops. Like, honestly, I feel like they could put pretty much anybody in that role, and it's like, yeah, okay, that's Cyclops.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't really care for Cyclops that much.
I was never a big fan of him either.
Yeah.
But I just feel like a quick glimpse, like I don't like the idea of like, let's forget that those ever happened. So I would like to see something in this new world that we're living in the new MCU, that you see some kind of flash where it's like, oh yeah, that's it. And so you're like, oh, it just kills the room, and people just start.
Even if it's just an acknowledgement just for fan service, just like a glimpse, like, oh, we're going through the different, the multiverse, and you see Patrick Stewart sitting there with Cerebro, and maybe he like looks into the camera, and him and Doctor Strange like lock eyes, and then it's like, oh, and then it goes away. Who knows? That would be great. I would love to see that kind of stuff come to fruition, especially after rewatching this movie, because I think that it does hold up over time. It's a quality movie. One of the better pre-MCU superhero flicks.
What would you score it?
At the time, watching it as a 19, 20-year-old, 10 out of 10 back then, and watching it now, of course, and being able to sort of break it down with a critical eye, and kind of thinking of it in terms of like, oh, I'm reviewing it for this show, like I'd probably give it like a solid 7.5, 8.
Yeah, I agree. Like watching it when I was 14, I would definitely give it 10.
14. Yes, my younger partner. My younger partner over here.
But I would say 7.5 now.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
still good. You're gonna enjoy the movie. There's gonna be a lot of times when you're watching, you're just like, I don't know if a line about what happens to a toad when it gets hit by lightning is needed in the movie.
Especially not in that accent.
Yeah.
What happens when the toad gets hit by the lightning? Terrible.
Tell me now.
Tell me now. Miss
Or
Cleo.
what were you expecting? Yellow spandex? It's just like the quirkiness, like that's the kind of stuff. But like the movie itself is still a solid movie. There is not a plot to the movie, but the movie itself is very, very good.
Right. It did not read as like a plot-driven movie as much as just like a character introduction sort of pilot. Like it was just like, these are the characters we're going to build a franchise off of. Learn about them a little bit.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
well,
cool.
That's our show for Throwback Thursday, X-Men, the year 2000. Thanks for joining us. Please make sure to like and subscribe and comment below, and follow us on our social media at We Them Nerds. I get it wrong every time.
At We Them Nerds.
Yeah.
On
Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Make sure to comment on those also. Let us know what you're thinking. Give us some heads up of what you would like to see on other Throwback Thursdays. It's a throwback for everybody.
It's true.
So
very true.
Thanks for joining us. Be kind. Be kind to each other.
Are you stealing my lines?
Yeah, I thought I was closing it out.
All right. Yeah. Don't be a dick.
Wear a face mask, guys. Later.